Hi, my name is Annie Abundis, and for the Gender and Generations module, I will be talking about the binary of masculinity and femininity that exists both in American culture, Mexican American culture, and Chicanx culture, and how its intersectionality with immigration makes both topics of femininity and queerness more complex. One of the terms that is not often, or that is often heard, is the term sexism, which refers to different ways in which the different genders, and specifically because of this binary of masculinity and femininity, are disproportionately affected, and then the ways in which they are represented, and the notions that are acceptable or deemed acceptable societally. One of these notions, for example, is, or if we look at two different ways of sexism, one of the ways is actually named benevolent sexism. And in this sense, we talk about women and how the word benevolent refers to terms or notions in sexism that we do not specifically identify as negative. However, they do have negative repercussions on the people who are impacted and influenced by them. In benevolent sexism, we center on women because we often tend to use words like gentle, caring, nurturing, which are assumed to be positive traits. However, it is still sexism, hence the term benevolent sexism, because we are still putting on different notions of what femininity is, who it is accepted to be portrayed by, who can have these feminine traits, and also these different views, such as being caring or nurturing, can be limiting to those who present as femme or those who are assigned or deemed by society to be feminine, specifically for women. So if we look at the movie Real Women Have Curves, we can see how this notion affects the women in the film, specifically Anna and also her sister Estela. We can see how she has been influenced by this. We see how the mom puts on these notions by saying that the women should be caring, and then that the things that she does and her accomplishments should be towards the goal of marriage and satisfying or meeting the needs of her husband. And in the sense, we can see how for immigrants too, we can see this complex relationship additionally between this American notion of individualism and also striving and success. And we can see how Anna is trying to own herself and also become more independent. However, with the status of immigration, we also see how there are still no cultural aspects that are taken and how this binary is influencing how we view femininity and masculinity. But at the same time, we see that Anna's liberation of her body and the way that she expresses this is seen as an act of rebellion. And furthermore, we can also see how the response to this, on the contrary, the masculine side, can present notions of toxic masculinity and the ways in which we define what makes someone man enough, or what makes them or how mask presenting should come across. For example, if we look at the film La Misión, we can see that one aspect in femininity and benevolent sexism is this notion of being basically gentle, soft, but then also these are indirectly or implicitly referred to also as making the women weak. And if we see this, something that is important in the binary is this notion of power, the power dynamics that happen, and men are often encouraged to represent and to prove their masculinity in senses such as violence or control. And in one scene specifically, when we see that the father finds out about his son's, or about the Polaroids, we see how he finds out about him being queer, being gay. And in this sense, we see that his reaction, and his reaction that he has oftentimes, is one rather than, we see hence communication that is happening, but it's not actually proper communication, as most of the time we don't see agreement, so we don't see the father trying to attempt to listen to the son or to have his values questioned, as having his values questioned or his beliefs and his culture would actually be contrary to this notion of masculinity. So rather, instead, he resorts to violence, and having this be something that he, or in in essence, also in the scene where he fights his son, having his son fight him back is also this push for his son to present more of these masculine traits, um, and to get him away, basically, from what he deems as being less than or less than, and being what we deem as feminine, and oftentimes in the queer community. Last but not least, also in Mari and Y Mosquita, we also see this example of how immigration plays into these complex notions of the masculine feminine binary. So oftentimes we think that masculine and femininity is going to cause issues between a man and a woman, or someone who's male and female. But at the same time, we can also see how women are also pushed to represent these notions of masculinity, even though deemed not acceptable. If we see between two women or between a group of women, especially amongst immigrants, we see how we want to push this notion of being independent, of having autonomy. So we see in the immigration community that even for women, we kind of have this balance between finding their place in this binary that often they are evaluated by in society. For Mari and Mosquita, we see how they have or as identifying as lesbian or queer, is not accepted by society, and we see this in their silence, because those moments of, although it's never explicitly said, we see the way that there's silence between her other friend who just looks and observes but doesn't communicate anything. But we see those moments of silence as being very powerful, because they say more about what is considered taboo, or what is considered incorrect, or what is considered wrong according to this binary. Thank you, and this has been my reflection for Gender and Generations.